Emma broke my heart. I know that I should have been more insightful and sophisticated about this whole matter. However, at the core, I'm still a small-town cook, even after all these years. I am Nathan Foster, a sous chef by profession. I know, not exactly glamorous, right? Fresh out of culinary school and earning my advanced certification in French cuisine, I was able to get my only job working in the kitchen of a mid-sized Portland restaurant. My position is in the restaurant's smallest station and, it must be said, the least prestigious, cold appetizers and salads. My living conditions are as modest as my work. Rents in Portland are notoriously high. At that time, apartments in the trendy neighborhoods were not available to junior kitchen staff. In those areas called up-and-coming, the prices were almost as steep. After much searching, I found a room in an apartment with two other impoverished souls at the end of a bus line in southeast Portland. The area was in general disrepair, and it took forever to get to my workplace. In short, I have a modest job and a roof over my head. More than this could not be said about the beginning of my career in the Pacific Northwest. However, my luck seemed to change almost from the day I started work. The restaurant's executive chef was Marco Da Vinci, a gray-haired Italian in his early 60s. He was one of the most respected chefs in Portland's culinary scene, the go-to guide for complex or innovative dishes. He had little patience for the ignorant or incompetent, but he was a good and willing teacher. Many years later, I am still grateful to Chef Marco. He, as these city residents say, did everything for me. He was my mentor and friend and taught me skills that would serve me well in the days to come. Without knowing it then, I found my place in life. And then, by pure chance, I found happiness. But first, I needed to mend my heart. The cold appetizer station was mostly just Chef Marco supervising me directly. In those prosperous times, appetizers and salads were the least popular specialty at the prestigious Portello Bistro. If we needed help, two part-time line cooks were willing to assist, albeit reluctantly. I graduated in a field that can be said to have been written by Lewis Carroll, a jurisdiction where left is right and right is always wrong. All flavors belong to Alice on the other side of the looking glass. The only member of my graduating class at Western Culinary Institute who went as far north as I did was Charlie Thompson. We weren't great friends in culinary school, but we bonded over our small-town experiences in a hip, foodie city. Charlie worked, or rather was a slave, for one of Portland's most exclusive catering companies. He was recently married to Karina, a girl from the city. An invitation to dinner at their Pearl District apartment was only natural. Upon arrival, I was stunned by the presence of a tall, extremely attractive woman. Emma Lawson was Portland elegant. This is the most obvious way to describe her. She was a sophisticated urbanite with a casual manner that suggested her striking appearance was to be expected. One could almost believe that the perfection of her form was a fact of nature and not the result of long hours of work and ingenuity. Why exactly she became my dinner partner at my friend's house, I had no idea. This brunette, green-eyed beauty was no match for me. Indeed, no one could have expected that she would be interested in an ordinary-looking small-town chef working as a junior assistant. But apparently, Karina Thompson, in her matchmaker wisdom, thought otherwise. An evening of delightful communication awaited me. Emma Lawson was not just a beauty. She had what is called personality, extroverted and not at all shy. She was an excellent dinner companion. She asked me to take her home to her Northwest District apartment. I expected to catch a taxi, but she insisted that we take the bus. She stayed close to me during the ride from the Pearl District to her trendy neighborhood. It was a trip that took quite some time at night and included some walking. She used this time to get to know me better, asking me questions, the answers to which she listened carefully to. It was a heady, ego-boosting experience. At the door of her apartment, she insisted on rewarding me with a kiss for my efforts to accompany her home. It was a scorching hot kiss. She could melt iron with that kiss. She acknowledged the fact with a knowing smile as she waited patiently for the dumb small-town cook to get the message. Can I see you again? I asked with some effort that we found a mutually agreeable time for our official first date, and then with a second, less heated kiss, she bid me good night. I flew back to my dingy abode at the far end of Hawthorne Boulevard, not believing that I could be so lucky. 5 weeks and 4 dates later, I was in a deep valley of despair. The night before, Emma had informed me that she would not be able to see me over the weekend. The reason was her previous commitment to another. With great difficulty, I extracted the name of James Keating from Emma. Finding out who this man was came as a surprise. He was the state health commissioner, a very tall, handsome, older man with whom one would expect intimacy from a woman like Emma. Apparently, I didn't hide my despair very well because Chef Marco called me into his office. "So, Nate, what wiped that stupid small-town smile from your face, leaving despondency in its place?" Marco asked. "Sorry, this is personal. I wouldn't want to bother anyone with my problems." There's no point in hiding anything from Marco, I thought. So soon, he had the whole story. He leaned back in his chair, folded his hands as if in prayer, and rested his chin on his fingertips. "When I was a boy," he began, "this city was still finding its culinary voice. It was interesting to watch the old guard, established restaurant families who spoke with Italian accents or inserted French phrases into their speech. These were men and women who had graduated from prestigious culinary schools but had mastered the art of being professionals with an ethnic flair. Now they are no longer there. Sometimes I miss the fun they brought to the food scene. Politicians are now polished professionals or tech entrepreneurs. They lack the same passion, or so it seems to me, and I think they take themselves too seriously. Sorry, Chef Marco, I don't understand. My deepest wish is that you never lose your small-town innocence," he said with a sigh. "Nathan, your girlfriend's man was born James Kellerman. His father was the heir to the Kellerman grocery store fortune, and his mother was from an old Portland family. James is married to Sophia Williams, a member of the wealthy Williams family. For political reasons, he took his maternal grandmother's surname, and the more approachable James as his first name. Jim Boy is a professional socialite and a full-time politician. Your lady apparently will prefer him for 3 good reasons. First of all, the man is 47. Your lady is much younger. Secondly, he is married to a good Portland woman with whom he has 3 children. This woman is not very jealous, allowing her husband to play on the side, but will categorically object to being replaced, just like her rich and influential family. And thirdly, there is Jim himself and his family. These are progressive times, but I doubt he's looking to insult his wealthy and politically supportive family by dating a chef's assistant. But what if she's dating him? I noted. Marco frowned impatiently, as he did when asking stupid questions. How old is this lady, he asked. 29. A lady with a neglected biological clock. And you are a suitable 26-year-old chef. I think you failed to correctly assess your weight in this matter. The introduction of Jim Boy into the equation was only meant to give you the proper motivation to move forward. For dates at this age with a 29-year-old single woman means things are serious. So either be serious or get lost, concluded Chef Marco. After talking with my boss, I felt better and, moreover, encouraged. On our next date, I pressed the point and was rewarded with a warm response. "If we move on, I need to know that things are serious with you," she said. "I can ask the same thing. Are you serious?" I answered, once again thinking about how smart Marco is. She took me to her bed. I wasn't a virgin, although I didn't have much experience. She had much more experience, and she used every bit of it. I barely survived that night. I moved into her apartment for a week. The apartment was large by Portland standards, with one of those hallways that seemed to go on forever. A marriage proposal was inevitable. She started dropping hints as soon as I moved into the apartment. When we met, Emma was 29, working as an associate manager at Reynolds Financial Management, already in the ranks of senior management, and soon after our engagement, she became a vice president. I realized that she was smart and somewhat meticulous, but I was almost shocked by her organizational skills. Preparations for the wedding took barely 6 weeks. Family-wise, she was the eldest of 3 children and the only daughter. Her father, also in finance, worked in wealth management in Lake Oswego and West Lynn, affluent suburbs of Portland. As far as I could tell, he was very interested in politics. That's why they planned a really big wedding so well and quickly. Death reduced my family to just my only sister, Nancy, who now lived with her friend on the coast near Astoria. She stopped talking to me the day she told me she was a lesbian. Maybe it was because I wasn't delighted, but some kind of chasm appeared that could no longer be closed. I invited her to the wedding, but she refused. My own career had settled into a comfortable rut. Now I was doing more challenging dishes without Chef Marco's help. He didn't hide the fact that he was preparing me. The appetizer station was stagnant, and Marco made no secret of the fact that I needed to be ready when things picked up because he was preparing to retire. You have everything you need, enough intelligence and a pleasant personality, but you need to learn to work. He said that I studied recipes and techniques very diligently. Yes, but you need some techniques that have not yet been written down. On the Friday before the wedding, I learned a new move. Emma and her mother chose Labor Day for their wedding. Something I didn't understand about this early date was that it also meant we had the weekend to prepare, and we could fly off to the coast for the honeymoon her parents were giving us Tuesday after the wedding. The suitcases were packed and stood against the wall in the long corridor of our apartment, 3 for Emma and 1 for me. I was a little nervous about the wedding, but I didn't have time to think about it. That morning, the week before, my bride-to-be had gone to the family home in Lake Oswego, so we could have a little time apart before the wedding. This will make the honeymoon even better and keep my wedding jitters from driving hubby away, she said with a laugh. At 10 o'clock on Friday, the last business day of August, 3 days before the wedding, I had a special tasting for a wealthy client regarding the preparation of an anniversary dinner. Such a tasting is done in an early stage of planning to establish the menu for the client's special event. In a small case like mine, the tastings are not very formal. Usually only the client, the chef, and perhaps a manager are present. Chef Marco usually stuck to the rules. I walked into the kitchen that Friday ready to grab my prep list and head to work, but the hostess told me that the client had called to set up a phone consultation instead. I immediately became nervous. The manager connected us, and the client said, "So, Nathan, tell me what your plan is for this menu." The client was a woman named Melissa. She was smart and knew food. Her critique precise and clearly addressed the weakest points of my proposal. She was an excellent food critic, but not very pleasant to look at. She was nicknamed Sweet Pea, which made no sense. She was short, less than 5 feet, and chubby, especially in the lower half, but I always thought she had a pretty face. When Melissa finished, I tried to speak, but the client interrupted me. "The menu is approved. My assistant will email the final details," she said. When the phone went silent, Melissa just laughed. When I asked her what just happened, she said, "Mrs. Peterson received tickets from my employer yesterday for the Oregon Coast Food and Wine Festival. She needs to be in Cannon Beach by 1 p.m. She can't talk to us on the phone today. For the sake of appearances, she okayed the menu in a case that doesn't really matter. But wait until next time, and I'll skewer you," she said, still laughing. "It's not the way I like to win," I complained. "Take whatever you can get," she replied and paused. "You know, my aunts would say that you are a very good young man for a goy," she said, still laughing, and ended the conversation. Around this time, Chef Marco came in and told me to take the day off and rest before the wedding. When I left, I couldn't help but ask, "Who are the goyim?" He smiled. "It's you and me, not Jews." "And what?" "Someone said that I was a good young man for a goy." "Oh, a compliment. Someone likes you." He said that I headed to the apartment, thinking I could head to Lake Oswego early. I was supposed to arrive only the next day. The wedding rehearsal was on Saturday evening. But damn, why kill time in the city? I expected to be busy with the tasting. It should have taken most of the day and maybe even the evening. We would have written and rewritten every menu item to please the client, but that didn't happen. So why not get a head start? I tried calling first, but Emma's phone went to voicemail. So I made a fateful choice. I called her parents' house in Lake Oswego, hoping to talk to someone or at least leave a message. I think it was one of those random circumstances that changed everything. None of the Lawson family was home. The regular housekeeper, Rosalinda, took the day off to fit the dress she would wear to the wedding. Her cousin replaced her. The cousin was a woman with limited English who I never spoke to. She didn't recognize my name. I want to leave a message for Miss Emma, I said for the third time. She's not here. She's in the city, the cousin said. I know that she lives in the city, but she came home for the wedding. This is Nathan, I said. She's in the city, staying at a hotel. Come to the wedding tomorrow, said Rosalinda's cousin. It took a second, but my curiosity was piqued. In which hotel? I asked. Nines, came the answer. I'm not a suspicious person, but who wouldn't pause after such a conversation? It was almost noon when I broke down and called the Nines Hotel. Our reception took place in Lake Oswego, not at the famous Nines Hotel in Portland. Something was happening that they didn't tell me about. There was a bachelorette party last week, but perhaps the ladies decided to have another prenuptial celebration. I called the hotel and asked for Emma Lawson. No one was registered under this name. Then, perhaps it was self-doubt that made me ask, how about James Keating? No, sorry, answered the young woman. Try James Kellerman. There was a pause, and she said, yes, Mr. and Mrs. James Kellerman are staying with us in the King's Suite. Please connect me. It could still be someone else, not such a rare name, I said to myself while the beeps were ringing. When the man answered, I almost hung up, but I had to ask, Emma Lawson, please. It's for you, I heard him say. Hello, she said. I recognized her voice, but could not speak. Hello? Is anyone there? She asked. There's no one there, he answered. Yes, he asked. Hello, this is Nathan. You shouldn't come to the wedding. I won't be there, I said, finally finding my voice. As I hung up, I heard her scream my name before the phone went dead. I don't remember the next thing well. I was shocked. I sat in the apartment as if paralyzed. In a sense, I was paralyzed. It seemed as if the strength had left my body. Everything good in my life seemed to disappear. It was all a lie, romance, living together, a fashionable apartment. It was our apartment, but in fact, according to the lease agreement, it belonged to her. My mind was in lockdown mode. I knew that I needed to get up, grab my suitcase from the hallway, and leave. I had nowhere to go, but I needed to get out of the place where I was. Someone opened the apartment door. It was her. I wondered vaguely how she got here so quickly. I looked at my watch and saw that it was already 2 o'clock. It occurred to me that Mrs. Peterson should be at the food festival by now. This fact changed my life. Nathan, we need to talk, she said. Have you been there all week? I asked. She stood in the middle of the living room, her eyes avoiding meeting mine. We just said goodbye, she said. So it didn't end like that? I said. Nathan, stop it. You know that I love you. How do I know this? I'll never see him again. We broke up, she said. Why? I was with him for 7 years, almost from the day I moved to the city. No, why finish? Because I'm marrying you on Monday, she said. No, you're not. I'm going out. Nathan, please be reasonable. Everything is arranged. More than 300 guests will come, she said. I didn't answer. There was no point. I stood up and walked past her. Where are you going? We must work things out, she cried. I grabbed my suitcase and went out. She followed me, screaming for me to stop. In the end, she gave up. I wandered aimlessly for quite a long time. I vaguely felt that I was heading towards the river. It was getting dark, and I was tired of walking. I crossed the street near Pioneer Square, found a small bar. It was full of people on a Friday night, but I found a dark corner and crawled into it. Hello, she said. I looked up and saw Sweet Pea Morgenstern. She had a glass in each hand. She placed one in front of me. I thought you looked like you could use it, she said. Thank you. I stuttered, taking a sip of a very strong drink. It's called a Manhattan, and as you can see, I'm not a religious girl, she said. Religious? I asked. She smiled. It was a beautiful smile, and she explained, drinking at a singles bar with the goy on a Friday night. And what should I tell my mother about that suitcase? When she said this, I lowered my eyes, suddenly remembering my suitcase. Oh, I had to leave. After all, this is her apartment, I said, taking a sip of the drink, which burned to the very bottom. Sweet Pea, Melissa, didn't ask me any questions. She told funny stories about herself and about people we mutually knew from the Portland food scene. This is a narrow specialization, and everyone knows each other. She kept my glass full and tried to make me laugh. I think she already knew I was engaged and soon to be married, but she wasn't surprised that I showed up at a downtown bar on the Friday before the wedding with a suitcase. Perhaps she drank a little before my arrival and did not understand the significance of the suitcase and where I was now. About the only thing I remember about that evening was Melissa helping me into the car and saying, "Not far to go." Later, I dreamed about Emma. She pinned me to the bed and enjoyed herself much more than usual. I needed to go to the toilet. The need was urgent, but when I got out of bed, I realized that I had no idea where I was. The apartment had changed. For a moment, I was completely disoriented, and then it all came back to me in one sharp and painful memory. I left Emma in her apartment, and where am I now? My head hurt, and it felt like someone had stuffed it with cotton wool. I remembered almost nothing about the previous evening. I remember going into a small bar on Broadway. One of my friends appeared there. For a moment, I couldn't remember who it was, and then I did. Melissa, Sweet Pea. What was she doing there? And what was I doing here, naked, in an unfamiliar bed? I was in a small room. It was barely big enough for a double bed. There was no other furniture in the room. The bed was directly adjacent to the window, which ran from the middle of a wall to the ceiling. I was alone on this bed, which had signs that a second person had slept on it. There was no closet in the room, and my clothes were nowhere to be seen. In fact, the room could have been an oversized closet containing a bed, but there was a door. It didn't open all the way because it was blocked by the bed. I looked out, and there was a larger room. There was a window on one side of the wall, and the sidewalk was visible outside the window. I was in what in this part of the world is called a garden apartment. This is the floor located below the main building. It is half above and half underground. The windows started just below sidewalk level. This space had been converted into a small apartment, or as I later learned, 2 apartments, the one I was in and an even smaller back apartment. The main room was divided by a counter into a dining room and kitchen. The bay window was a sort of living room with 2 small chairs and a window seat. Seeing no one, I crawled outside in search of the bathroom and my clothes. There was a door at the far side of the room. When I got out, Melissa came out in a robe, drying her wet hair with a towel. "Oh, you're awake," she said, noticing me just in time. It must be almost noon. My hands flew to cover my groin, which only caused her to giggle. "It's too late for modesty," she said. "Last night, I saw everything." All I could do was run past her. Figuring the room she came out of with wet hair was the bathroom. I was right, and after closing the door, I lifted the toilet seat and released the contents of my bladder into the toilet. It was a small bathroom with only a shower stall, no bathtub. I decided to take advantage of this and wash myself before discussing with the hostess what happened to my clothes and suitcase. The shower may have been small, but the water was hot and soothing to my very hungover body. Refreshed, I searched in vain for a towel. Wet and naked, I had no choice but to go out and meet Melissa. I opened the bathroom door and walked out, only to realize that we were no longer alone. A young dark-haired woman sat at the table and looked straight at me with a wide grin on her face. Melissa was in a small, open-plan kitchen, fiddling with cups and a coffee pot. "How do you feel about coffee?" Melissa asked as easily as if I wasn't standing there naked. I jumped back behind the bathroom door and called, "Can I have some clothes, please? Or at least a towel?" Both women burst out laughing, but Melissa stopped to say, "The towels are in the closet, as are your suitcase and the clothes you tore off last night." Poking my head out from behind the door, I asked, "Where could the closet be?" Still giggling, Melissa pointed the coffee pot at the barred doors at the back of the room, behind the desk, and right in front of what must have been the front door to the apartment. "I would bring them to you, but as you can see, I'm busy," said Melissa. The other woman made no attempt to get up, and I had no choice but to run to the closet. Having reached the closet, I opened the doors. My clothes were there inside. The suit and shirt were neatly hung, and the underwear lay on the suitcase. I grabbed the last one, pulling on my shorts and shirt as quickly as I could, but all this time, I heard the women giggling behind me. "By the way, this is my sister, Sarah," said Melissa. "Hello, Mr. Foster," said Sarah. "Hello," I replied, opening my suitcase to take out my jeans. Because of me, You don't have to get dressed, said Sarah. I am the younger sister, but I'm already married and have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. Naked male bodies don't shock me. They both laughed as I pulled on my jeans. Let's go have some coffee, Melissa invited. And I'll bring babka in a minute. In case you're wondering, Sarah whispered to her sister. You didn't tell me that he was so shy. I didn't know, Melissa answered, also in a loud whisper. We seem to barely know each other. You're a free woman, Sarah added with a giggle. After putting on my trousers and shirt, I turned to take a seat at the small table. I need coffee. I like it black, without sugar, I said. Sarah giggled and whispered to her sister. I think he got his sweet pea last night. They burst out laughing. I had a headache. Melissa handed me a cup of very strong coffee. As I was putting the cup in front of me, my mobile phone rang. It was Sarah's phone, and she took it out of a large leather bag lying at her feet on the floor. Oh, hi, Sarah said, answering. She covered the receiver and whispered, Aunt Esther. Then, addressing her sister, she continued, Of course, I remembered. Now I'm with Melissa, but she has guests, and I didn't have a chance to mention it. There was a pause, then Sarah said with a grin, No, her company is a man. Melissa ran her hand across her throat as if cutting it off, but Sarah calmly continued, Yes, he is handsome, but a little shy. No, he's definitely not Jewish. Yes, I'm absolutely sure. Sarah whispered into the phone. I caught a glimpse of him when he came out of the shower. Now Sarah was laughing uncontrollably. She wants to talk to you, Sarah said, handing the phone to Melissa. Hello, Aunt, Melissa said into Sarah's phone. No, I will never forget Dad's birthday tomorrow at 6 o'clock, and at 7 o'clock, we have dinner. Got it. Oh, he's just a friend. Is it true? There was a pause while Esther apparently spoke. It won't work. He's a friend from work. I'm sure he'll feel awkward at a family party. Melissa handed the phone back to her sister and listened while her aunt spoke. I don't know, Sarah said, and then turned to me. She wants to know your name. What should I tell her? Nathan, I answered. Nathan Foster. And I'm pretty sure they slept together last night, Sarah blurted out. Melissa screamed. Aunt Ruth is on the line now, saying that they want to meet him. No. Oh, sweetie, no. Melissa screamed. Then Sarah handed the phone to me, saying, My Aunt Ruth wants to talk to you. I took the phone and put it to my ear. Hello, Nathan. I'm Melissa's Aunt Ruth, and my sister Esther and I are throwing a party in honor of the birthday of our brother David, Melissa, and Sarah's father. We'd like you to come with our sweet pea. Could you do this? It will mean a lot to the family. I don't know. I wouldn't like to interfere, I said, looking for a polite way to refuse. I'll leave it up to Melissa. I then handed the phone to Melissa. She argued with the aunts for a good 10 minutes while Sarah grinned mischievously. The aunties on the phone hung up, each taking turns arguing with her niece. Finally, Melissa gave in. Okay, I'll bring him, she said, and then hung up. Sweet pea, sweet pea, sweet pea, she does that, you know, said Sarah. What? I asked. Replaces the word sweet pea with obscenities, as if we don't know what she's really saying, Sarah explained, smiling. One last time, Sarah stood up and said, Well, it looks like my work here is done. It's time to go unload my husband before my kids drive him crazy. Left alone, Melissa turned to me and said, Look, you don't have to go. My family can be a little overbearing sometimes. I just don't understand why your aunts want to see a stranger at a family gathering. Melissa gave a short, almost sad laugh and said, Sarah is my younger sister, almost 4 years younger. On my last birthday, I turned 30. She already has 3 children. My aunts and my entire family think that I should already be married and pregnant. It looks like my biological clock is ticking on their shelf, but they still don't know me. And apparently, I'm of the wrong religion, but you are the right gender, she said and paused before continuing. You see, I used to have a roommate here who helped pay rent, $3.50 a month. As you probably know, junior food critics don't get paid that much. I nodded, aware of the limited salaries in our part of the culinary business. But then it dawned on me, there is only one bed. Was your roommate a woman? Yes, but don't rush to conclusions, Melissa said. I'm not going to say that I'm completely straight, but to have sex with a girl, I need to be slightly drunk. For Jessie, my former roommate, drinking was a deciding factor. She wanted a relationship that I couldn't give her. And here I am, almost straight, the Jewish spinster. I thought about what she said as I munched on a babka, a sweet, braided bread that's usually topped with streusel. It looks a little like a coffee cake, but it's not the same. Finally, I asked the question that had been nagging at me. Were we together last night? Melissa burst into loud laughter and said, yes, we were together, although I didn't really like being called Emma. Sorry, I said, feeling my face turn red. Hey, don't be prudish. We were both a little drunk, she said. What's up? You were very drunk. I drank my coffee for a long time and tried to figure out how my life had taken such a strange turn. Yesterday morning, I was on the phone pursuing a case against a woman now sitting across from me in a robe, one Melissa affectionately known as Sweet Pea. Yesterday morning, I was excited about my upcoming wedding to Emma. The next day, I had already lost Emma and was discussing yesterday's sex with the same Melissa. This is too much, I said. What? Melissa asked. I said, Emma and the fact that I'm here with you, I replied. She didn't laugh, but looked thoughtful. Listen, you had a hard time with all that. How about relaxing here today? Melissa suggested. I thought for a moment. I don't think I can stand being alone right now. If you don't mind, I'll stay. She smiled and said, fine. We'll make my heterosexuality worth it. So we did, and returned to bed. Sex with Melissa was different from sex with Emma. However, Melissa was so enthusiastic about sex that I was amazed. Wow, you sure like this? I said. It's been a long time since the last guy, she muttered. But not girlfriends? I asked out of curiosity. She propped herself up on her elbows and looked at me. I've slept with a lot more women than men, if that's what you're asking. But it's not for sex. I lay next to her, and a little further on the bed. In one swift movement, she was on top of me. She looked me in the eyes and said, in my opinion, nothing compares to a man in sex. But in a relationship, I need more than just sex. I need someone I can relate to, and more than that, I need someone I can respect as a person. How do I fit this definition? I asked. You are a very respectful partner in bed. It's obvious that your fiancé has put a lot of effort into improving your skills, she said. I didn't have a good answer to this statement. I resented the implication, but Emma did give me a lot of training in bedroom skills. However, Melissa continued, you are here in my bed because you are a good person. I've been watching you. You never hurt anyone if you can help it. You are honest and treat women as people, not objects. In short, you are one of the good guys. This is a group that is in short supply right now. I answered. This is all very good, but is this really how a novice food critic looks like? You were following me. I accused. Followed you? Well, of course I followed. I saw you on Broadway and followed you to the bar, didn't I? If Miss Emma Lawson has lost track of her trophy fiancé, I'm not one to miss the opportunity. I'm not a trophy, I insisted. You're not going to say that she was in love with you? She asked. No, probably not, I said, feeling all the sadness of the situation wash over me. Sorry, she said. I didn't want to offend you with those words. She slid down my body, and we were once again in the grip of passion. In the end, we ordered dinner to go and, after eating, fell into an exhausting sleep. The aunties called in the morning, reminding Melissa about the upcoming party and asking if she could come early to help with the preparations. Sweet Pea, don't forget to take Nathan with you. Sarah told us all about him, and everyone really wants to meet him, Aunt Esther told Melissa. I don't know what Sarah told you, but he's not my boyfriend, Melissa clarified. Well, bring him anyway. He knows he's invited. If he comes, Melissa said and hung up. As far as I understand, they are waiting, I said with a grin. You don't have to go, Melissa said. What else should I do? I don't want to be alone right now, I admitted. Melissa had distracted me from the disaster in my personal life, and I had no desire to sit and dwell on what Emma had done. Okay, she said, but be aware that you will be subject to scrutiny and treated as a potential suitor. Well, in a sense, I am the groom. But if you don't mind, let's keep my personal problem a secret, I said. Sounds good to me, that Emma doesn't exist anymore. But just for today, Because you're going to have to deal with her, and the sooner, the better. I replied with a slight sigh. Melissa reached across the table to cover mine with hers and said, Nathan, you must either go through with this marriage or end it tomorrow. Either way, you'll be in big trouble. I can't go through it. Not now, I said. Don't be so hasty. If you give up now, it will have big consequences for your career and life. There will be a huge scandal. Why? I'm not going to divulge the reason, and I'm sure she won't. Oh, my poor innocent, she said, squeezing my hands tightly. Do you really think people didn't know about Commissioner Keating and Emma Lawson? They have been together for quite a long time. I thought they broke up, I said. Melissa didn't laugh, but her crooked smile said it all. Emma dated Keating the entire time we were together? But why? I asked. If she wants to remain his mistress, then there is no point in involving me in this matter. He wants to run for governor next year, she said. Your marriage to Emma seemed to end the affair, and you were a fair catch, the kind of young, decent, professional, heterosexual man every cis woman in Portland is looking for. Cis woman? I asked. A person who identifies with their gender by birth. In this case, a woman. Emma Lawson, a young woman in need of a partner to quell rumors of her affair with an older, married politician. She played a prank on me, as you Portlanders like to say. Oh, don't feel sorry for yourself. Perhaps she was just saying goodbye, as she claimed, a week before her wedding. Would you rather she did it the week after? Melissa suggested. I would prefer if she didn't do this at all. In fact, I insist on this, I said firmly. Well, you took revenge on her with me. You can still go to Lake Oswego and marry her. It will not happen. Hey, you need to pull yourself together before you do anything rash. If you don't come to church tomorrow, people will ask why. Look, okay, time out. A scandal does no one any good. You, my friend, are a junior chef in the cold appetizer department. Commissioner Keating, on the other hand, is a very big shot. You make a wave, and his boat may rock, but yours will sink. Are you saying that I will lose my job? What I'm saying is, you'll lose your career. Nobody will hire you, Melissa warned. I had to pause, but not for long. Melissa, I said, I may just be an unsophisticated guy from a small town, but when Emma accepted my proposal, she made a commitment to me. She didn't keep her commitment, and you can't force me to keep mine. Melissa just shook her head. Finally, she said, Come on, you stubborn small-town cook. Get dressed. I'm taking you to meet my family. It's not every day that they get to meet a real, living Presbyterian. Actually, my family is Lutheran. Same crap, she winked. At 5 o'clock in the evening, we took a yellow taxi to her family's house on Alameda Ridge. It was prohibited to use car services. Uncle Morris was a taxi driver, or was until he retired. Morris now lived on his pension with his two sisters, Esther and Ruth, in the house the sisters had inherited from their parents. Morris was married, but his wife ran off 30 years ago with a shoe salesman, a fact that apparently was never discussed. Aunt Ruth's husband died in Vietnam. Esther never married. Only Melissa's father, David, the youngest of the siblings, had children. David and his wife, Rebecca, had 2 girls, Melissa and Sarah, and now 3 grandchildren, thanks to Sarah and her husband, Gerald, Jerry. The house was in an area of Portland which realtors called Alameda Ridge. When we arrived at a huge 2-story house on a large lot, larger than a standard size for the city, I did not notice any ridge, unlike Melissa's apartment, which was across the street from a small park in a quiet neighborhood. Her aunts and uncles lived on a busy avenue. The house was built in the craftsman style, not big enough to be a mansion, but the single-family home was larger than one would expect in a city like Portland. We were greeted at the door by Aunt Esther, a short, strong woman with metallic gray hair. First, she hugged Melissa and greeted her, calling her Sweet Pea. Then she turned to me, examined me for a very long time, and said, Not bad at all. Handsome young man. Oh, I think he's very handsome, said Aunt Ruth, appearing from the depths of the house. Ruth was a tall, dark-haired woman. The 2 sisters seemed like an incompatible pair. Ruth hugged Melissa, and both aunts led us into the kitchen, where the evening dinner was being prepared. There was a large cake on the kitchen table. The kitchen smelled of roast meat simmering in the oven and the sweet scent of vanilla. "Will you peel the potatoes, Sweet Pea?" Ruth asked, handing her a potato peeler and a colander filled with freshly washed potatoes. "I'll take your man to help set the table," Esther said, taking me by the hand and leading me through the swinging door into the wood-paneled dining room. The room was a long, wide rectangle. The hardwood floor was covered with a thick burgundy carpet. Dark oak panels stretched from the floor to halfway up the wall, where paper artfully etched with ferns drew the eye upward. The ceiling was an intricate lattice work of mahogany and oak. A modest chandelier hung down from a mahogany medallion with ornate carved flowers. Esther led me to the china cabinets along the nearest wall. The closets took up most of the wall on the short side of the room. Numerous sets of porcelain plates filled the cabinet shelves. She led us to the far closet and said, "Today, we will use these plates." Having said this, she smiled at me and said, "It's not easy to be Jewish. All these utensils are needed." At that time, I only had a vague idea that one set of dishes was intended for meat and the other for dairy. Esther handed me a stack of plates, and we began to set the massive table with claw legs. It was covered with a snow-white linen tablecloth. I couldn't resist and secretly examined the bottoms of the plates and the tags on the linen. Porcelain was brought from England, and linen from Ireland. The real thing, I thought. Just like the people. Real. While Esther set the table and I carried the dishes, she seemed to question me aimlessly. I assumed that this was done to separate me from her niece. Soon, she already knew my entire personal history, with the exception of the failed marriage. When we put the last silver fork on the last plate, she said casually, "It doesn't hurt, you know, just a small piece." Most children don't even cry. The meaning of these words escaped me. However, before I could ask for an explanation, we heard a noise in the corridor. A powerful female voice called, "I'm here, and I brought the birthday boy." It was Rebecca, also known as Judge Morgenstern of the Oregon Supreme Court, as it turned out. She was Melissa's mother. Her father was David, a professor of economics at Portland State University. I was invited to David's birthday party. Esther pushed me into the kitchen while she went to greet her brother and sister-in-law. When I entered the kitchen, Melissa was peeling potatoes and putting them on the stove. She turned to me and said, "We need to wait here while my aunts break the news that you are here as their guest." "Am I going to be a problem for you?" I asked, suddenly feeling the need to protect her. "No, but perhaps a little shocking. I've never brought a man home before. Mom can be a little critical, so be prepared." The situation was awkward and only got worse when we were called into the living room to introduce me to her parents. The living room was a large, comfortable room furnished in the style of the first half of the 20th century. This room could feel calm, but I felt tension. On the way, Melissa took a small box from the light jacket she had hung in the hallway when we arrived that day. The box was clearly wrapped as a birthday present. There was an awkward silence when we entered the living room. David, Sweet Pea, broke the silence with a smile and a joke. "Is this young man my birthday present, Sweet Pea?" he asked. "No, Dad," Melissa answered quietly. "I brought you this." She walked over to give her father the gift she had brought. She didn't let go of my hand, and I realized that she had been holding it tightly for some time. "Well," said her father, "I was hoping for a son-in-law, but I'm sure I'll like this too." At these words, he smiled at his daughter. Opening the package, he took out a baseball that was clearly used. His smile widened as the others looked at him in confusion. David said, "Thank you," and then picked up the ball. "This is a game ball signed by the Timbers," he said, and stood up to hug his daughter that I heard him whisper in Sweet Pea's ear. "Still, I would prefer a son-in-law." Melissa whispered something in response, but I didn't hear it. Her father chuckled, but when I looked back, her mother was glaring at me. Just at that moment, Sarah arrived with her husband and 3 children. The kids rushed into the living room to take their places in the spotlight. "Oh, it's good that you came," Sarah said, hugging me briefly and introducing me to her husband, Jerry, a tall, skinny guy who could be blown away by a good wind. "This is Sweet Pea's new love. As you can see, at least she got the gender right this time," Sarah said. Jerry shook my hand and said, "Don't pay attention to Sarah. She just likes to tease her older sister." Soon, the conversation in the living room turned to the topic of the children's latest adventures and the gifts they brought for their grandfather. It was nice to be out of the spotlight, but I felt Melissa's mother's gaze on me. Dinner was simple, but nonetheless delicious. The conversations at the table were filled with the hidden joy that these people received from being together. From time to time, I was asked a question. If Melissa could answer it, she immediately began to answer for me. I answered more personal questions simply or brushed them off. Yes, my parents died. The restaurant is in my hometown. I only have a sister. I ignored all the questions about my sister, partly because I didn't know how to answer them. However, over coffee and birthday cake, everything came out. Judge Morgenstern was watching, and while the children were busy eating the sticky cake, she struck. "Tell me, Nathan, are you a relative of Foster who will marry Emma Lawson tomorrow?" I paused before responding, but spoke before Melissa, who was sitting across from me, could give the harsh response I had anticipated. "Yes and no," I said. "It was I who was supposed to marry Emma, but it all ended. And before you ask, your daughter had nothing to do with the annulment of my marriage." "Is it true?" Melissa's mother asked, turning to her daughter. "Yes, really. If it concerns you," Melissa said, showing her hostility. "To tell you the truth, I didn't want to bring Nathan here, but he was invited, and he was kind enough to come." I saw that my mother was about to say something else, but David spoke and silenced her. "Rebecca, be quiet," he said before his wife could answer. Obviously, the young man found out about Mr. Kellerman. "I've been watching Nathan all evening, and he doesn't seem like a man who could put up with this." It was as if he had splashed cold water on his wife's face. The judge was suddenly speechless. Looking around the table, I realized that while Melissa's parents were aware of the situation, the other diners were not. Melissa chimed in. "I've known Nathan for some time and admired him from afar. When I found him that evening, lost and alone, I saw my chance to get to know him better. He was hurt by a truly evil woman, and yes, Mom, I love him. He's too good not to be in love with him." While she was saying this, Melissa walked around the table and hugged me from behind. "Well done, my niece," Uncle Morris said, ending the conversation on the topic of Melissa and me. I don't remember well what happened after that, except that there was an atmosphere of general satisfaction at the table as we drove away in the yellow taxi. I turned to Melissa. "Are you serious?" I asked. "What?" she asked, trying to avoid answering. I couldn't stand it and demanded, "When you said you loved me, were you serious?" The taxi seemed to become very quiet, and then she slowly raised her head and said, "I love you. When I first saw you many months ago, I wanted you. But now, it's more than just attraction. I love you, Nathan Foster." 30 minutes later, I was arrested. Emma apparently sat in our apartment all Friday evening, waiting for my return. Where did she think I could go? However, when I had not returned by the next morning, she became desperate. The wedding was scheduled for Monday, and she suddenly became afraid that I might not come. In a panic, she called the only person who, in her opinion, was losing more than her, James Keating, aka James Kellerman. Immediately, they began a search through the police. It took them a day to interview all the bartenders on Broadway to find out that I had left the Sapphire Lounge bar in the company of a short brunette. Since Melissa and I had taken a taxi at midnight to her apartment in Alameda, the police decided to interview all the taxi drivers working in the area that night. It wasn't until late Sunday that they determined that the taxi had dropped us off at the corner of Knott and 29th. They quickly determined that the corner basement apartment belonged to Melissa Morgenstern, a woman matching the description of my companion on Friday night. The police found only a dark and empty apartment, but undaunted, they stationed a couple of patrol cars to await the occupant's return. It was the eager group of officers that Melissa and I found upon arrival. They quickly took me away, despite Melissa's objections. At midnight, I found myself in a small room that was in dire need of cleaning and a new coat of paint. They sat me down at a table and handcuffed me. No one explained what crime I was accused of. Someone opened the door, and Emma entered. She looked beautiful as always. "So, you were responsible for this?" I demanded. My tone was harsh, and my anger and disappointment were obvious. She looked a little dazed as she stood on the other side of the table. There were 2 chairs on her side, but she made no attempt to sit down. Nathan, please try to understand. When you didn't come home, I became worried that something had happened to you. That's why you arrested me? For what? I asked. You were not under arrest, but under guard until a possible psychiatric examination, said a tall, very handsome man. In fact, he was more impressive than his photographs. He entered quietly, and while he spoke, he moved towards Emma. He was more than 20 years older than me, and all his efforts could not hide his middle age. I saw that he was making great efforts to check the influence of time. James Kellerman, I believe. I said this with all the venom I could put into my voice. James Keating. But, Nate, you can call me Jim because I hope we can become friends. For you, Mr. Keating, and I have no desire to be friends. It's a pity because I believe that you are in a difficult position and could use my friendship. I raised my arms a few centimeters, causing the chains to tighten on the table. You can keep me here, but not for long, I said with more confidence than I felt. I hope long enough for you to listen to Emma. She stood there without saying a word, but now she spoke. Nathan, you are acting under the wrong impression. Jim and I are just friends. Whatever relationship we had is over. If you had stayed late on Friday, I would have told you everything. We have a saying back home. I may have been born at night, but it wasn't last night. I found you in his hotel room. I objected. Whatever it is, the 2 of you have a wedding date set today, and it is in everyone's best interest that you stick to it. Sorry, but I refuse to marry this traitor, I said. Emma let out a slight cry of pain, but Jim just smiled and said, Language, please. Let's maintain composure. Would you rather I call her what she is? Because that's who she is. I realized that I had slightly hurt Jim, but he continued to smile. Emma turned away, crying. Such an attitude will lead to big troubles. You are being very stupid, young man. Emma is a wonderful woman who will make a great wife. If you don't get married, there will be a terrible scandal. Reporters are expected at this wedding. This is a social event. Emma's reputation will be ruined, as will mine, because, of course, the reason will become known. People love to gossip, and this would be great gossip. I was told that you have a promising career in a prestigious restaurant. If you don't marry Miss Lawson today, your career will evaporate, and I doubt you'll find work anywhere else, he threatened. Now, it was my turn to smile. I wouldn't marry her for the executive chef position, and I certainly wouldn't stay as a junior chef in the cold appetizer station. I told you that he would be unreasonable, intervened Emma, who had her back to me and was clearly crying. Jim just sighed and said, Okay, Mr. Foster, how much will it cost me to make Emma Mrs. Foster? Believe me, you don't have enough money. It doesn't have to be forever, a year or 2, and then a quiet divorce. Won't people ask why? I challenged him. He didn't flinch, and something told me that he had more than one iron in this fire. The situation at the time of divorce will be my problem. Name your price for marriage within 2 years, he said. How long has she been pregnant? I asked, finally realizing. Emma turned to me. The child could be yours, you know, she hissed. Yes, I said, but I think I'll wait for the DNA test. Jim just said, How many? No way in the world. I almost spat at him. Further conversation was interrupted by the appearance of a short, fat, bald man of about 60. He was followed by 2 uniformed officers. Upon entering, he said, Hello, Jim, Miss Lawson. And you must be Nathan Foster. He said this, putting his hand on my shoulder. I'm your lawyer, Schwartz, and this, he said, handing Jim the paper, is a copy of the writ of habeas corpus that I just filed for registration. You got up quite late, didn't you, Sam? Said Jim. Well, you know how it happens. Things are going a little slow. Miss Lawson acted in the best interests of her fiancé. You're forcing us to seek a forced commitment, Jim threatened. I don't understand how you can do this since the warrant was issued on behalf of his sister, his only living and closest relative, Sam said. Woke her up, didn't you, Sam? Said Jim. Actually, no. It's still early on the West Coast. Commissioner James Keating, a.k.a. James Kellerman, shrugged. He was defeated. Sam brought me out, and Melissa was waiting for me. Her mother, the judge, woke up Sam, and the judge who signed the order for my release. That was the last time I saw Emma. The child was never born. I don't know the reason. I know that her biological clock was ticking, and I know that she wanted his child, not me. However, I am sure that if the choice was between a scandal that would harm her lover and an abortion, she would choose the latter. As for his threat to ruin my career, I have no doubt that Commissioner and gubernatorial candidate James Keating tried everything he could to ruin it, but circumstances intervened. From the 2nd to the 14th of September, 2008, I took leave for my honeymoon, and my destruction never took place. The day I returned to work, September 15th, the financial markets crashed, and the culinary world was turned upside down. Chef Marco became the most important chef in the restaurant, and I became the most important sous chef. It took 6 months of 90-hour weeks for Melissa and me before we could get married. We had to make it in time since she was pregnant, and it was clearly visible. Melissa didn't think to take any precautions because, before that first weekend we spent together, she hadn't slept with a man in quite some time. The eldest was a girl, like the next 3. However, turned out to be enough. Melissa became a respected food critic following in her father's footsteps in journalism, and I have my own restaurant now. When people ask me the secret to my successful career and marriage, I say it all comes from one day as a food festival judge, one broken heart, and a girl named Sweet Pea.